Hello, SCC family, welcome. Thank you for joining us today in our live stream. And before we begin this whole thing, I just want to say the Christ is risen. Again, thank you for joining us. I do hope that you're staying well, you're staying healthy, you're staying strong. I know this is less than ideal circumstances, especially as we celebrate Easter this Sunday. But I wanted to share with you a quote that I found this week that hopefully will give you a different perspective for today. The church will look like the grave of Christ, empty. All the saints will be like the disciples were, gathered in a house somewhere, discussing what all this means. And the Lord will do for us what he did for them. He will appear in our midst. Christ has promised that he'll be with us regardless of the circumstance. And now that we're meeting in this unconventional means, let me assure you that Christ is still with us. Christ is still in our midst. I hope you all had the chance to go and put the symbolic offering at the church and the cross at the church parking lot today. If you haven't yet and you would like to participate, the cross will still be there after the live stream. So if you want to go and do that afterwards, you can do it, and then later on tonight we'll go and take a final picture, so we can see what that looks like. So again, thank you for joining us. Thank you for being here in this live stream. I'm going to invite you as always to focus on the things that God wants to say and wants to do in our lives today. So regardless of where you are, whether you're in your living room or your bedroom or a different room in your house, regardless of the screen that you're using, maybe you're using your phone or your big TV, it doesn't matter. I'm going to invite you to relax, to be comfortable, to focus on God this evening, and let's all worship God together.
Hello everybody, just taking a moment to give you our greetings and let you know that we're alive and doing fairly well. We're not necessarily doing as well as our dog, who is enjoying the snow and likes to lay in cold places, but we're healthy still, for the most part, apart from a few long-term sniffles and whatnot. Our business and our farming enterprise is still going forward. It's not really shut down in any way. Sorry we can't get eggs to you. We seem to have lots of demand for eggs these days, but here's Peter, our musician for today. Spent a long time recording those songs, but do you have anything to say?
Hi. That's it.
That's all. The man of few words. And Carolyn had the misfortune of a bit of a burn on her arm a couple days ago, so she's nursing that a little bit, but
we miss everyone. It was great to see a few of you in the Bible study, ladies' Bible study last night. Know we are praying for you, and just remember to be strong and courageous in these uncertain times, and just look for opportunities to love others and to serve when you can. Love you guys.
I was reminded this week of that part of our relationship with Jesus is as our brother. We are joint heirs with him, and he's like our older brother. And when my older brother is close, it just seems like nothing can go wrong. And when we live close to Jesus and feel his presence in our lives, we can take on anything. And so we'll get through this, and just hang on to hope, because with God there's always hope. So God bless you.
Hey everybody, happy Easter. I just wanted to remind you that after service tonight we're having a Zoom prayer meeting. The link will be in the description below the video if anyone would like to join that. And now we're just going to take a few minutes to collect our offerings. We have a couple of different options. They're listed on the screen. There's e-transfer or other ways of online donating. And so it'll just take a few minutes if any of you would like to do that now. But first I'll pray for the offering today. Thank you, God, for that, that we're still able to meet together, connect together, and still have our church community, even though we can't do it in person. Lord, I pray that you would continue to bless the church financially, and so that we're still be able to be a service in the community, God. And I pray that in these hard times that you would keep on providing for everybody, Lord, all of our families and the other families that we know. And Lord, just thank you that we can always put our trust in you. In your name, amen.
And as we celebrate Easter Sunday today, we're gonna reflect on John chapter 20, verses 1 down to 18, and really we're gonna focus on the very last 10 verses of this passage. And really, what I would like to do today, as we reflect on Jesus' resurrection, is that I would like to focus on the character of Mary, the way that John presents her anyway. So again, this is John chapter 20, and we will read the whole passage, I guess, from verse 1 down to 18, and we will focus on the last 10 verses at the end. So again, John chapter 20 says, "Early on Sunday morning, when it was still dark, Mary Magdalene came to the tomb and found that the stone had been rolled away from the entrance. And she ran and found Simon Peter and the other disciple, the one whom Jesus loved, and she said, 'They have taken the Lord's body out of the tomb, and we don't know where they've put him.' And Peter and the other disciples started out to the tomb, and they were both running, but the other disciple outran Peter and reached the tomb first, and he stopped and looked in and saw the linen wrappings laying there, but he didn't go in. And Simon Peter arrived and went inside, and he also noticed the linen wrappings laying there, while the cloth that had covered Jesus' head was folded up and laying apart from the other wrappings. Then the disciple who had reached the tomb first also went in and saw and believed. For until then, they still hadn't understood the scriptures that said Jesus must rise from the dead, and they went home. Mary Magdalene was standing outside the tomb crying, and as she wept, she stepped and looked in, and she saw two robed angels, one sitting at the head and the other at the foot of the place where the body of Jesus had been lying. 'Dear woman, why are you crying?' the angels asked. 'Because they have taken away my Lord,' she replied, 'and I don't know where they have put him.' She turned to leave and saw someone standing there. It was Jesus, but she didn't recognize him. 'Dear woman, why are you crying?' Jesus asked her. 'Who are you looking for?' She thought he was the gardener. 'Sir,' he said, 'if you've taken him away, tell me where you have put him, and I will go and get him.' 'Mary,' Jesus said, and she turned to him and cried, 'Teacher!' 'Don't cling to me,' Jesus said, 'for I haven't yet ascended to the Father, but go find my brothers and tell them, I am ascended to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God.' And Mary Magdalene went and found the disciples and told them, 'I have seen the Lord.' Then she gave them his message." And as I said, I would like to focus on the character of Mary today, the way John presents her, because there's very interesting differences in the way that John presents Mary's reaction to Jesus' resurrection, or the unknown of what has happened to Jesus, than the other Gospels. In a way, I think that she's interesting because the way she responds, I feel, speaks volumes to the situation that we're living. We're living very realistically in a bit of a chaotic thing, with the what was normal is not there anymore, and we are not sure what's it gonna look like on the other side. So today I want to focus on Mary, and I think she presents a very interesting, very, very feminine response to the mystery of Jesus' resurrection that we can learn a lot about, or we can learn from quite a bit. And I think that might give us a clue of what our role as a church is in the midst of this chaos, and what our role as a church is going to be as we come out on the other side. So the Bible begins telling us that it's early in the morning and Mary is going to the tomb. And it's interesting that John presents Mary on her own. The other Gospels present Mary among other women going to the tomb to prepare the body. Yet here is Mary alone, and she's going to the tomb. And she's not only alone, but it's also early in the morning. These are all indications of grieving. She's in a place where she needs to be alone. She needs to process. She needs to think. So she's going to the tomb. She maybe finally got up and said, "You know what? I need to go for a walk." So she's going towards the tomb, and she's all alone. And I can't help but think of all the people that are alone around this season. See, we've made this point of making the kind of the slogan, if you will, for our community this season, that idea that we're isolated but not alone. But I can't help but think people that are not only isolated but are also alone, and they don't have a community the way in which we might. So Mary is all alone, and she's going early Sunday morning, and it's still dark. And when she gets there, she finds that the stone has been rolled, and in her mind, what she's thinking is that someone stole the body. That's what's going on here. See, it's interesting because Mary has seen a stone being rolled before. She's seen Lazarus coming out of the grave after Jesus called him out, and she's experienced this. But this is not what comes to her mind. And it's interesting because in these difficult situations, sometimes we don't react, we don't respond the way we always thought we would. Or if we thought we were prepared. See, it's interesting because right now all the governments in the world are kind of scrambling to address this situation. And this has caught us all unprepared. Like, we as a church will not prepare this eventuality. And, the last couple of Sundays, couple of weeks, we've kind of like stumbling our way through, what we think is a healthy way to carry our community. So Mary has seen a stone rolled before when Jesus called Lazarus, but that thought, that memory is not present in her mind. Her thought is someone took the body. So she runs back. She goes back to find John and to find Peter. It's interesting that John makes the distinction between calling John as the disciple whom Jesus loved and Peter. It's interesting that he makes that distinction. He gives John a title but not Peter. And we should remember that Peter is the one that denied Jesus 3 times before his crucifixion. Yet they're both there together, and I like that scene. I like that they're both there together, because one is the beloved disciple, the other one is the one that has denied Jesus in the square. Yet they're both there together, awaiting. And I love it because in the resurrection. There's room for both. There's room for the faithful disciple and the failing disciple. See, in the family of God, there's no distinction because through resurrection, we're all under this umbrella of forgiveness and love. So they're both there. So Mary has found the tomb open, and she runs back. She runs back to her community. She comes and say, I've just went to the tomb. The body's not there. The stone was rolled over. And John and Peter do what sadly we are men often do. We spring to action. We spring to try to solve the problem. To try to make sure if what Mary is saying is actually true. See, I'm not sure that's what Mary needed at that point. Maybe what she needed was one of them to come up and say and hug her. Maybe what she needed was one of them to give him a word of encouragement. See, we live in a world where it seems that chaos is all around us now. We live in a world where people around us are grieving, whether because they've lost loved ones, whether because they maybe lost jobs or sources of income, or just because of the anxiety that the season brings. And sometimes a reaction is just too harsh. Not in a bad way, because we want to offer help, but our reaction sometimes is to spring into action, to try to look for ways to solve the problems. When sometimes what those around us need is simply a listening ear, a shoulder in which they can cry an encouraging word. So John and Peter, they both go running towards the tomb to see if what Mary said is actually true. And the Bible tells us that they get there and they pick in, and all they see is an empty tomb. In fact, there's an interesting verse there that when John picks in and sees the empty tomb, the Bible tells us that then he believed. And I wondered, then finally he believed what Mary was saying. So Mary also comes back to the tomb, and both men are there, and both pick in, and all that they see is an empty tomb. And I want you to remember this, because this is going to be very important as we close. So they both pick in, and all they see is an empty tomb. And once Mary gets there, what do you think they do? What do you think they sit there and they try to console her? They try to help her? They return, leaving Mary alone once again. And the Bible tells us towards the end of the passage that Mary's there alone again, and she has tears in her eyes. Verse 11, Mary was standing outside the tomb crying, and as she wept, she looked in. Notice that it's interesting that that the Bible tells us explicitly that she's got tears in her eyes as she looks in. And you know what's interesting about this, though? That is the same expression that the Bible used for Peter and John. They looked in, they all picked in, and John and Peter, all they see is an empty tomb with some coverings and bandages laying around. But Mary leans in, and what she sees, with tears in her eyes, she sees two angels. See, she's performing the same action that John and Peter did, but the way she looked in was different. She had tears in her eyes. See, sometimes we're so busy with our regular lives that we fail to see what God is doing around us. We fail to see the reality of the kingdom around us. And sometimes we are forced to stop. Sometimes we need something to propel us to look at the world differently. And as Peter and John both look in and they saw an empty tomb, Mary looks in with tears in her eyes. And through the tears, she sees two angels. Dear woman, why are you crying? And the Bible tells us that she turned around and saw a man. She saw Jesus, yet she doesn't recognize him. And Jesus asks her once again, why are you crying? Now at this point we can maybe imagine that light started to break through, and maybe there's a hint of sunrise around her in the garden. And in her mind, maybe Mary remembers Jesus' words. Very truly I tell you, Jesus will have said previously, you will weep and mourn, but the world will rejoice. You will have pain, but it will turn into joy. See, and this is what Mary is experiencing. She's experiencing this indescribable pain. And there's a promise that pain will eventually become joy. See, the season of Easter is this pregnant pause, if you will, in the church's calendar. Is the time in which we pause and we expect the mourning that we experience in Good Friday and before to turn into joy. And I believe, I have to believe that we are maybe experiencing this same pause as a world, as a community, as a church. Is this pregnant pause of wait to see what God's going to do, and we have to believe that all this chaos around us will eventually turn into joy. Furthermore, Jesus will say that joy, no one will take it away. So Mary still has tears on her eyes. And she says, they have taken my master away. Notice that there's something that she has lost. There's something that was comfort present for her, something that was important, someone that was important, and that has been taken away from her. And she doesn't know where to find it. See, and the truth is that our normal lives have been taken away in a weird way. And now we don't know where to find them. We don't know what else to do. So Jesus calls her out, Mary. And the Bible tells us that as Jesus calls her by her name, she recognizes him. I just know is that she turns around, she sees him standing there. She doesn't recognize him. And Jesus asks, woman, what are you looking for? And she said, well, I'm looking for my master and I can't find him. And then he calls out Mary. Twice Jesus calls him. Once a woman and once as Mary. And once he names her, or he calls us by her name, she recognizes that it's Jesus that has come back. And I think this time in which our lives are kind of, there's no normal anymore, our lives are kind of this pregnant pause, I think this might be a time for us to stop and to, with new ears, try to hear Jesus once again calling us by our name. Teacher, she says, and she comes and grabs us, and I imagine that she hugs him to the point that she's clinging to his clothes, and then Jesus has an interesting word to tell her. He tells her. So in verse 15, Mary, Jesus said, and she turned around and cried, Teacher, and then Jesus said, don't cling to me. Notice that that's a very interesting statement, because time after time again, especially in the Gospel of John, Jesus has called his disciples to abide in him, to remain in him. Now this time he's telling Rachel, don't cling on me. There's still things I need to do. And that's an interesting thought. Because through scriptures we see Jesus calling us to remain and to abide in him. And then at some point he will tell Mary, don't cling on me. Don't cling on me in the way, because I'm no longer the same person that you knew. I'm no longer in the same state that you are used to. I am not here to stay and to perform the same miracles again. See, and I think that's true about us in our situation. See, we're all looking forward for us to go back to normal, to what life used to be. And I think maybe that's the wrong way to see it. See, we're clinging to these ideas that we had, and we're hoping that we can go back to do those things. And Jesus maybe is telling us, no, that was good back then. Now don't cling to this, because there's new things that I'm about to do. Don't cling to me, Jesus said, for I have yet to ascend to my Father. But then he calls her to a mission. Then he gives her a task. And maybe Jesus has given us a task as well. Maybe as we celebrate this Easter in isolation and in separation, maybe Jesus is calling us, say, hey, don't cling too hard to this idea that we're going to go back to the way things were. Maybe there's a new thing that I want to do, but I do have a task for you. Jesus tells us, go back, find your brothers, and tell them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and my God. I'm going to go and prepare your stay there. But I will not leave you alone, Jesus will later tell us. I will send the Spirit that embodies God's presence in our midst. That has no body and has no limits, that knows no time or geographical boundary. See, Jesus is telling, don't cling to me, because this form of me is no longer going to be here, but the Holy Spirit will be with you forever and ever, always, in any time, in any moment, in any place. But go and tell your brothers about this hope that is found in Easter. And maybe that's our task as a church now. To go and tell those around us that death does not have the last word. That destruction and chaos do not have the last word. The death could not contain Jesus, and death could not contain the Spirit in this time. Maybe it's time for us to go and announce it in a safe manner, in a safe way to those around us that are living in chaos, that their whole lives are upside down, that they're grieving loss of loved ones or sources of income or of jobs, and tell them this is not the end of the story. There's new things that Jesus wants to do. Maybe this time we are called once again to be people of the resurrection, to proclaim that God is still around us and within us, that God is still in our midst. Maybe today we're called to go and preach in the midst of grieving, to see with new eyes what God is doing around us, and to call people out of death and destruction and chaos into life and resurrection.